G'day, Paul from Small Crown Productions. Welcome to the Business of Art. I'm really excited to bring you this interview today with Laura Milke Garner. Laura is a producer in Melbourne. She is a 20-year veteran of the comedy circuit down there, produces theatre, she's produced in the Arts Centre and the Sydney Opera House. She manages tours, she programs for venues. She's a bit of an all-rounder in that programming and producing space. And while doing all of that, she's got 3 kids under 9. So she's a bit of a powerhouse and somebody that we can all learn a lot from. There's a few things that I think we can really take away from this interview. The first is how Laura built her business with the end in mind. She really had a good idea of the type of work she wanted to do, the way that she wanted to work, and what she wanted that business to look like in 5 and 10 years' time. And she built the structure to get there from the word go. So I really think there's a lesson to be learned in the way that we approach the building of our business, and we can learn that from Laura. The other thing that I really think is fascinating is the way that she chooses and decides on how she's going to work with artists, what she's looking for on artists that she's going to work with, and her mindset around her role and what her role is. And finally, the way that she has diversified her income streams around her specific skill set. And that is something that we can all do. Let me know in the comments below, what is your biggest takeaway from this conversation with Laura Milke Garner? Laura Milke Garner, thank you so much for having a chat today. Thanks for being here.
My pleasure.
Excellent. So, first up, just give us the quick kind of 2-minute rundown on how Laura got to be where Laura is now. So, how did you get where you are? What are you doing?
Okay. In terms of producing, I fell into it, which is a fairly common thing for producers to say. The little backstory on that is that I was a radio announcer and broadcaster. So that was always what I was gunning to do. And I pretty much set out to do that, worked in commercial radio, and then realized maybe that's not quite what I wanted to do. And so changed tack. So I started working in the arts as a box office manager, and sort of fell into sort of that world of fringe festivals. And then the producing side was really just an artist really approaching me to say, you look like you're good at organizing stuff. Do you want to produce my show? And I don't really think, I knew what a producer was, but I don't think I fully understood. But I was like, oh yeah, that seems pretty cool. And sort of continued on to do that. So I sort of did that on the side, producing on the side for probably 10 years, as well as working in the arts. I ended up going back into radio as a special events manager for Triple R. So I was still sort of, oscillating between the two. And then in 2008, I made the decision to leave the full-time job to set up a producing business. So it is a company. It's a proprietary limited company, which, was a huge decision to sort of make. And also to go out on your own to be an independent producer, also quite mental as well. Yep. However, even 12 years ago, I could see that there was a place for producing skills to be matched with artists, and I'm very... I really love the role of producing. I love the role of fostering artists and making their work happen. As much as I'm very confident and out there, I'm very much a behind the scenes person,
Yeah.
I'm not interested in being on stage. I'm not interested in directing the show. And I actually think that's really important for a good producer to be like that, because I have no ambitions to go, I really want to be doing what you're doing. Yeah. So I'm very happy to be behind the scenes. So the whole idea was to set up a producing company to support artists, and that's what I did. And that has been going really, really well until 2020. But everyone fell off a cliff, so that's all right. Yeah. And so the business now, so I'm a working producer. I work in the disciplines of theatre, comedy, and cabaret. Mainly, and then the other half of my business is mentoring independent artists and producers in producing, marketing, and pitching their work.
Brilliant. I got to say, hearing you say that you used to work in radio makes so much sense to me, because I've been on
does it?
workshops
I've been in a bunch of your Zoom workshops and just seen you deliver, and and your podcast too. I love your podcast, and just your voice. I'm like, oh, she's so good. Like vocally, I'm just like so good. So it makes so much sense to me now that I know you were in radio as well. So that's amazing. So so 12 years now producing, which is amazing as an independent, and it's just you, isn't it? The company, do you outsource any of it, or is it really just you?
At the moment, it's absolutely just me. From time to time, I do kind of, concertina up and down, and that was the whole design of that kind of business model, I guess, to bring in people as I need to, but also knowing, like even 12 years ago, that working in the arts isn't, it can be really tricky. So I wanted to be able to kind of, expand it where I needed to, but if I didn't have as many shows on, or if I was working more in development or whatever, I could sort of pare it back. So the people that I do bring on at the moment are contracts. And so that's kind of looking to change in the future, hopefully, to make that a bit more stable, but we'll see how that goes as well.
Yeah, I mean, who knows what the landscape's going to look like in the next year or so. And, I mean, we're finding up here, obviously, we've gone back to 100% capacity for shows. And
it's amazing.
It's so good. But there's, and there is a lot of people coming out to see shows, which is great, but there's still a real hesitancy, I guess, for a lot of people, which is fair.
I think that is totally fair. And I think we've just got to try and weather that storm as much as possible. I'm feeling very optimistic about it, though. I think there'll be a really kind of strange period of people kind of finding their feet and getting back, and then all of a sudden we'll kind of, I think about maybe this time next year, or 12 months on, you're sort of looking going, oh yeah, that wasn't actually as big a thing as what we thought.
Big a deal as we thought it was. No, I agree. I think, people will get confidence back, I think, fairly quickly when they realise, a few shows have been happening and, nothing's come up. And, as long as we don't get another kind of community flare up, I think, things will generally be pretty well okay. Theatre, comedy, cabaret, interesting mix. What was the start? What got you there first? Which was the first thing you started producing?
Comedy, probably. The business, Milke, has been running for 12 years, but I've been producing, like independent producing, for over 20.
Yeah, amazing.
So comedy has formed a huge part of that. So I've done, I think it's like 22 comedy festivals in a row.
Wow.
Which is insane. I feel
incredible.
like an old grandma now going, oh, I've seen this, or I remember this 20 years ago, So comedy has always been a big thing. And when I say comedy, it's there's been some stand-up, but really the evolution of comedy over the last sort of even 10 years, there's so much more interesting kind of, fragments of that. There's your stand-up, but then there's, comedy cabaret, or there's physical comedy, or there's clowning, or stuff like that. And they're sort of the things I'm really attracted to. So comedy has been a big part of that. But then because I used to work in theatre has also been a part of that as well. So it kind of is a bit of a head change, because working in comedy is kind of, well, it was a bit looser years ago, not so much now, because people can see, or I think comedians can see the career path that they can possibly take, whereas 20 years ago, comedy wasn't a career path. So I'm finding that people are way more professional. Not to say that they weren't professional before, but there's a different drive now, because they can see the opportunities that maybe they can take up.
Yeah. So rather than going from gig to gig, they're actually going, this is where I'm heading. I've got a trajectory. I've actually got a plan in place for the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. Or, I want to get onto radio, or I want to get my own TV show, and that's kind of, or I want to write my own TV show. Like, that's kind of career paths, not of all, but of some, most certainly. And then the theatre side, I like working in what I call proper theatre. So I've done, bigger stuff for sort of Sydney Opera House and an art centre. And I like working with theatre professionals in that kind of world, because it's very different. Comedy can be a bit more slap bang together, whereas theatre, especially with a bigger budget, is different. And we've got a lighting designer, and we've got a set designer, and we've got a sound designer, and so I really love that aspect of it as well. And then the cabaret has been more, it's really just been shows that have been, that I've, picked up over the years and sort of moved into that realm. And so it's really the disciplines that I like. Not to say that I don't love dance or circuits. It's just not my jam as much.
No. We've each got our flavors.
That's right. And I think as a producer, you've got to really drill down on that. You can't produce everyone. You've got to work out what you love to do justice to the artist and the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you look like? What do you look for? Well, actually, let's get to that in a second, because I'm curious about how many shows you currently or regularly in a 12-month period. Or, I mean, I know, kind of listening to you talk on some of the podcast stuff, you're often working kind of 18 months ahead, 12 to 18 months ahead. How many shows will you have kind of in your portfolio at any one time?
It really depends from year to year. Currently, I've got about 10, and that seems like a good number for me and my work. And considering that it is just me.
Just you.
Yeah. Which other people will hear that and go, oh my God, and I don't want that to sound any other way than what it sounds, but I've worked out over time that I can manage that amount. But keep in mind that that's not 10 shows being produced at all the one time. One might be in a creative development, one might be on tour, one might be doing something towards the end of the year. So it sort of all flows in. Some people that I've sort of got that I'm working with, are taking a bit of a break at the moment, but we're looking at other opportunities. So it sort of flows in and out. And I feel like that's the kind of good number for me, and to keep it small. I think any more than that, then the company itself would have to expand, which is also okay, but it brings it into a much different model then. And it would mean me not working so closely with the artists. It would be me training in other producers. Yeah, which is also okay, but it's a different kind of model.
Yeah, that's right. It's a different job too, it's and there are some people that just don't want to do that. So I don't want to be so big that I like the one-on-one personal time. Maybe I'm shooting myself in the foot with, to not expand to where it possibly could be, but I don't operate like that. I like to have a pretty close hand in, and if someone, if I'm working, if they're getting Milke in terms of the brand, they're getting me. I'm not shutting them off to an associate producer or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing about growth and scale, isn't it? I mean, you've got to, I dabble a lot in kind of entrepreneurial circles and other kind of podcasts and stuff around business and marketing. And the thing I hear all the time is, when you're thinking about scaling, don't lose sight of the thing that you love to do the most, because it's easy to do. And all of a sudden you think you've got to have these other people doing that, when you could you could bring somebody in who is that organizer and the manager, and you still get to do the bit that you love to do. It's just about filling the right job that's going to serve the needs. Right. So that's amazing. So what does a day look like for you? I mean, and sort of 10 shows on the cards, everything from creative development through to a season that's running. What's a day look like?
It can be very varied. I mean, the other thing I should add in here, I also have 3 children under 9, so that keeps me.
Oh, wow. That's rockets on the boots. Holy cow.
Yeah, when I sort of drop that sometimes, it's not that I'm trying to hide it, but it kind of comes out sometimes in conversations and people go, oh, hang on, you've got 3 kids as well. And it's like, I
knew you were a mum, but I didn't know you had 3. Yeah. And under 9. That's amazing.
4, 7 and 9. So,
wow.
Yeah, there's, I guess in terms to answer that question, at the moment, my time is not my own. Yep. So I have to be really efficient with the time that I do have. And to put it, to sort of put it out there, sometimes I only have during the week, maybe, 10 hours, if that, child free. So if you kind of roll that around your brain, that's not a lot of time to get a lot of stuff done. So that will change as the kids kind of get older. But an average day for me would be, it would be anything from looking at touring opportunities for the artist, talking with programmers, talking with venues, looking at what's coming up on a kind of 6, 12, 18 month basis. I'm very, very long term in terms of planning, not only for my artist, but definitely for my business. Like I will put things in place that will pay off in 10 years time. Like
amazing.
I'm that person, even to be honest, even setting up Milke in 2008, I was just about to get married and I knew we wanted to have kids. And one of the reasons for setting up the business was like, oh, wouldn't that be great if I had my own business when I had kids, to be that flexible. Yes, that's what happened. And that was great. But also anyone thinking about that, also mental.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, great, I work from home. It's like, yeah, no. But you see what I'm saying? Like, it's like I was planning a long time ahead. And even that decision to do that, 12 years ago has put me in a really good position now. So it's been, a 12-year payoff, but, if I didn't do it then, I would have been behind. So in terms of every day, so looking ahead, seeing what's coming up. There would be immediate things that I'd be doing if there was, a show that I'm producing. So that would be anything from, budgets to marketing, to ticket tracking, to all of that kind of stuff. And then I would just be looking at, as I said, other opportunities for the artists and where we're going to place them. Sometimes with the touring stuff, that can work 18 months ahead. So I'm booking tours, and talking with venues and trying to kind of pull things together. Yeah, sort of a varied amount of that. That's with the producing stuff. And then with the other side of Milke, I would then maybe be mentoring. So doing a one-on-one session with an artist or producer. I also run 2 online courses as well for artists and producers. So I might be doing some work on that, or I might be running some other kind of workshops for, other festivals or organizations. So it's fairly varied, and that's completely by design. The way I've structured it is exactly how I want to work. So I like I like the variation. Sorry, I was laughing because some days I do, like, depending on the act. I've got one act that, he likes to get nude, and I have, I can have conversations where I'm actually talking about G-string and ball placement with a programmer, to then talking about how to market a show. And I laugh going, this is like, it's mental. It's mental what you do. It's like, this is not a job, but it is a job, but it's also, it's a complete privilege. Yeah. Like, what a silly job, but it's great.
It's incredible. What's your favorite thing about producing? Like, what's the thing that really lights your fire when you're working on something?
Probably seeing a show get up, to be honest. Like the amount of work that goes into a show from all different areas, I often say, like, as the producer, when I'm talking with artists who are self-producing, like I say, I know how much work you're putting in, and I could only, imagine it, because you're wearing both hats. You're producing and you're writing and directing the show. I know how much work I put in just on the producing side, let alone if I had to write the show and perform it and direct it. So I like all those elements coming together, and seeing, I guess, an artist or an ensemble or a theatre, like I like it, seeing it come to that, to that last kind of point. That's probably my favorite thing, because then all the work has been worth it. To walk into a venue, and I like to kind of, slink up the back as the producer on that opening night and just go, this is it. It's on, it's full. great, you know, we
Yeah.
did it. That's probably my favorite bit. And as I said, it's that behind the scenes stuff, you know. I don't need to be on stage or at the front. It's like that's my applause, you know, for
Yeah.
seeing
Yeah.
it all happen. So yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. So what do you look for in an artist that you are thinking about producing? So, and well, I mean, you've kind of mentioned a few things, and I know that the full gamut of everything that you do as a producer, you know, obviously it's everything you were talking about before, booking and marketing and all that kind of stuff. Is there any parts of the roles that you particularly don't do that you're like, when you get me, these are the things I do, these are the things I definitely don't do? Like, do you know what you're completely just, nah, that's someone else's job, that's just not me?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And it's one that I actually talk about with a lot of producers, because I feel like you have to be really, really clear with that, because
Yeah.
there is a real misconception, I think, in the industry. And I don't think it's anyone's fault per se, but it's that a producer kind of just does everything, you know,
Yeah.
they're just a jack of all trades. And it's
Magic
like there's some
wand.
kind of, yeah, there's some kind of magical unicorn. And I really, really try to kind of demyth that, because I don't think that's healthy for the industry. And I don't think that's healthy even for artists looking for a producer going, oh, once I get a producer, then all my problems will be solved.
Yeah.
I
So
think
same way I think a lot of them think about a marketing person. It's like, oh, if I get someone to market the show, life is great.
yeah, well, often that even falls on the producer, and
Mm.
some producers are better than that than not. For me, it's like I love to get into a budget. I love managing a budget. I like making that work. I love the marketing side. I really love the marketing side, so I'd probably go heavier on that in my producing style. Pitching and programming and pulling tours together, I love. The bits that I maybe don't love as much, which I don't think is completely, you know, uncommon, is grant applications. I mean, to say I'm not great at them, I guess I've got as many for artists as I haven't, you know, and
Yeah.
I think that's probably,
Pretty
you
good track
know,
record.
yeah, you know, it's kind of I've probably got less than what I've got really, but you know, then they can vary from like $5,000 grants to like $50,000 grants, which is awesome. But even that to me is actually changing for me over the last couple of years, because I think anything in this kind of role, sometimes you can tell yourself a story that you don't like it, and sometimes you actually really don't like it. Like, there's no point forcing yourself into doing it. I know there's some producers that are like, I hate the marketing. And I said, well, don't shoehorn yourself into that, because
Yeah.
it's only going to cause trouble for the show, or balls will be dropped, or you know, it's just not going to work. So yeah, for me, it's probably the grant applications, where I know with a lot of the artists that I work with, often they're much better at writing the grant. So I will be all across maybe the budget side and all of that sort of material, but the actual writing of the grant, yeah, not so much. But it depends. It depends on the show, and a case by case basis of who's doing what,
Yeah.
or who needs to do what, really.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah.
When you're talking budgets, a question I love to ask people are the things like, I just had a really good chat recently with a tax and finance accountant around all that sort of stuff for artists, which was an amazing conversation. So
Yeah,
for
great.
you, as someone that loves budgeting, what would you say are some of the common mistakes you see artists make when they're putting budgets together? Is there anything that really pops out?
Yeah, I think just a fundamental understanding of how a budget works.
Oh, interesting. Just the basics.
Quite honestly, and I think it's because you fall into this role with artists who are self-producing. Again, they're wearing so many hats. All of a sudden, they have to be across finance and budget and marketing and all this stuff, and they're like, I just want to write the show. I just want to do this bit. I don't
Just
want
want to do the art.
Yeah, which is fair enough. And so I honestly think it's I mean, I think this stems even from high school, you know, like there needs to be more fundamental understanding of how money and budgets work. And I say that as a person that freaking hated maths. Like, I hated maths in high school. I think I got D's in grade 8 and then gave it up.
Sister. Yeah.
Yeah. So
not a fan.
it makes me laugh when I'm like, I love budgets. And, you know, if I can get into an Excel spreadsheet, it's truly my happy place. And
little halo appears and
even doing my tax and things like that, like I like it. And I think it's because numbers don't lie, right?
Yeah.
So if there's a problem, you can logically, and my brain is very logical, like you can logically go, okay, well, that's literally not adding up. So what can we do? I also think budgets tell a story when it comes to a show too. You know, you can project what it may be, but then, you know, if you're getting more money in the box office and you can bring that back, or you've maybe got a grant, so now you can do a bit more. And so it's this bendable thing. And I think I like that. I'm kind of attracted to that. So for artists, I think the mistakes that they make is, as I said, that fundamental understanding of what a budget is, and just not enough education about that. And I also feel that and I've seen it, and I know it. I've seen it over years of mentoring artists, that they reach a certain point, and some, not all, maybe are embarrassed to kind of say, oh, I still don't know what, when you say gross and then net, it confuses me. Yeah, I think sometimes it's that once they understand it, and I love being able to sort of teach really basics of, you know, I'm still no maths whiz by any stretch, but I still use my fingers to count too. But I think there's, it's like anything, isn't it? It's that understanding. Once you have the confidence to go,
yeah,
I get this, I understand, then everything kind of clicks into place. And I think it's the most important thing for artists to learn, because if you stuff up on your budget or don't know the true cost of your show, or if it's just you and you're like, no, it doesn't matter, whatever, I'll pay for it. You know, who cares if it's another $500, I'll just pay for it. It's like, yeah, but you can do that maybe for 1 or 2 years. But, you know, if you do that for a couple of years, you're potentially going to get yourself into trouble.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. It's something certainly that I went through, and I'm still not great, I'll be honest. You know, I'm not great with the budgeting side of it. I've got a much better, mostly from the self-producing side of it. Like, give me someone else's money, no problem. I can manage that really well. But when it comes to funding my own shows, so when it comes to that, knowing how much I want to spend on that, and I think the big thing is really getting into spending the time to get into the nitty gritty and thinking through all of the things that could potentially have to be spent, and putting that in the spreadsheet, and then sticking to it was the other thing of like, no, we're not buying that. We're not paying for that, because do we really need it? You know, and what can we do with what we've got? So yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, it's super, super important. And I agree. I don't think there's enough education out there about it.
There's just not. And it's just like knowing the true cost of your show. I think a lot of artists get surprised too. Like if they've got, well, firstly, like people have got, regardless of industry, I think everyone's got some weird thing with money. Yeah. Like,
and that's talking about it.
No, they don't like talking about it. And sometimes it's like, oh, I don't want to say that the show did well, or whatever, you know, whatever it is. But it's where complications can happen, especially in ensembles, or even just a producer and artist relationship. When they see box office come in as a gross total, which is the complete total, it might be something like 20 grand, but the show might have cost $19,000, you know? And so if they're not understanding the basics of that, they'll be like, well, hang on, where is this money going? It's like, well, it's paying for all of this. The second scenario that I see is independent artists maybe, getting box office at the end, and maybe they get a lump sum of $3,000. It's like getting your tax back or something. You're like, I got $3,000. It's like, I've had to retrospectively do budgets with artists to go, okay, well, let's build the budget that you didn't do. That's cool. But actually your show cost you $5,000. So, like you've got $3 back, but you're down $2, and they're like, it's like, it's any kind of money tracking is is really important. It also means then, I think it then determines what you do next as an artist. Like, can you actually afford to go on tour, or can you afford not to go on tour, and you're taking that risk? Either way, it's your choice. But having the, I guess, the data behind that will help inform that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. I totally agree. And that, you know, for me is, you know, looking at what that cost is, and then how can I turn this show over and over and over, so that once that's spent, now it's hitting a point where we don't have to spend that again. We've built the set, we've got the costumes. Now let's just make more money out of this show to turn it.
Absolutely. I'm on a current show at the moment where we're building quite an elaborate set. It will look quite elaborate, but we're actually trying to make it as tourable as possible. We're all kind of seasoned professionals with touring. So this is my favorite place to be when I'm making a show with artists, to try, and I don't even mind spending a little bit more to go, okay, if it's an extra bit of money, but it means it can fit into 3 road cases or whatever, I'd be happy to do that, because we spend the money now. I'm so confident that we can tour this show that it will pay off later on, you know?
Wow. The long-term savings in space on trucks, freight, fuel, weight, all of that stuff.
Huge.
Yeah,
it's huge.
Yeah, it's a great way to think about it too.
Yeah. If you can. I mean, it's not always possible, and I understand that, but where possible, it always seems sort of counterintuitive of spending that money. You're like, but then later on you're like,
yeah, but you're really working with, you know, what is it? You're starting with the end in mind. You know this is going to tour.
Yeah.
You know what those long-term costs are, those constant impacts on tour. So you're planning now to save that money over the long term, which makes complete sense to me. Complete sense.
Long term.
Yeah. So what do you use? What tools do you use day to day? Like, obviously you talk about Excel, so you're obviously using Excel. You know, what are the kind of main systems,
programs
and softwares that you use?
I use a couple of things. So Excel, definitely. I sort of I oscillate between Excel and Google Sheets. I often will do Google Sheets when I'm working with budgets with artists. I find that is Excel feels a bit more old school now, but I mean Google Sheets are pretty much the same. So I often use that as a Google Sheet to share, but I often will just give them a view only option, or the team a view only option. So not because I'm trying to be a control freak, just to limit the the amount of cooks in the kitchen, but I'm very transparent with everything that I do, and any producer that anyone's working with should be. You should be able to say, where is the budget at, or show me the budget, and they should be able to bring it up and go, right. So having that means that they can check in at any point, but they can write me notes to say, oh, hey, can I spend this much here, or I'm going to spend whatever. So I find Google Sheets is really good. For sort of everyday organization, I use a program which is stupidly called Monday, which you might be familiar with. The reason I say it's stupid, because it's a project management system, but to say put it in Monday, it's like, what Monday? This Monday? Last Monday? But I really love it as an organizational tool for my business. I do have a paid version, so it can be a bit expensive, but that's part of my operating costs. But I like the connectivity of it all, and the way it kind of flows. And I've sort of altered it, I guess, to a sort of producing platform for me and my sort of templates. The other one that I also recommend and have used before is Asana, which some people might be familiar with as well, which is a free program. Excuse me. There is a paid version of that, but I know a lot of artists and producers do use the free program. So if anyone's looking for something like that, Asana would be absolutely what I would recommend. And then I use other tools, like I use an online contracting system called HelloSign, which is a secure digital contracting system. There's various ones out there. HelloSign is actually part of the Dropbox group, actually.
Oh, okay.
So but because I sign a lot of contracts and agreements and stuff like that, and this is all, you know, properly encrypted and stuff like that, I find that that's really good and really easy. And I can even do it on my phone if I absolutely need to. So that's really good too. And yeah, and then they're kind of probably the main daily tools that I use. And then there's, you know, I'm also very much pen and paper, and I'm also whiteboard as well. So I sort of go between all three, really.
Yeah, I'm a big space guy. I just painted 2 cupboard doors in this room where I'm at. This is just literally last night, moved my laptop in and got the office set up. And
yeah, nice.
Out in the dining room for years, and I'm like, I've got to move. But my wife's been painting the house, so I'm just like patiently waiting. So, but we've painted the cupboard doors in here a chalkboard paint so that I can have a big space to scratch and play.
Yeah, there's something that I like about, I mean, I love pen and paper. There's some connectivity between, you know, brain and hand, that kind of thing. I'm a big list person, but I also like the whiteboard. And I think there's something also, I mean, there's probably, you know, there's probably articles written about this, but there is something about standing up and looking at like writing things out, or even if it's like a brief flow chart or something, and sort of looking it back. Yes, you can draw it on the computer, but I find that it's not the same.
Something visceral about being able to get up and do it. Yeah, I love it. I just having that, like, one of my favorite purchases ever years ago, and I'm not quite through it yet, but I'll have to buy another one soon. Favorite purchases was picking up a secondhand roll of 45 centimeter wide butcher's paper on a 100-meter roll. So I rip it off and stick it to the wall.
Perfect. Yeah.
It's so good. It's the best ever.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that kind of stuff's amazing. So yeah, I'm the same. Pen and paper for me. I mean, I use the computer a lot, but I love being able to put something up, take a step back and think, no, fix it. So
yeah. And people use you know, people use Post-it notes as well. You know, they can use different things. I think there's, that tactile thing is really good for sort of for planning and pre-planning.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. Big fan. So what do you look for in an artist that you are thinking to produce? So when you're looking at, when an artist is coming to you and asking if you could produce for them, or if you see an artist and the work that they do and you're like, I want them. What are you looking for? What are you chasing?
Something that I can do justice to, really. Sometimes, I mean, obviously it's always the artist, you know, that I'm looking at, and then the show. Sometimes it is the show though. I know that sounds kind of strange, but sometimes I lead with, you know, I love the artist and what they could do and what we could do together. But sometimes it is the show where I go, yes, I can do something with this show. It may not be subsequent shows that I then produce of that, but that one show, 100%. So for me, it's, I can pretty quickly now, I think just from years of experience, identify what's going to be a good tourable show. For me, it just has to be something that, firstly, that resonates with me, but that I also think would resonate with, you know, programmers and festivals, and that I can see that it could be programmed in there. I've also got to be really comfortable with something that I know that I can pitch and talk about. Most commonly, I'm not, the artist isn't in the room or on the email or on the phone when I'm talking with that programmer or festival or venue. So I'm representing them. So it's a huge responsibility. And I don't take that lightly by any stretch. So I've also got to be really clear on what it is, especially if there is, I mean, if it's something kind of fun and, you know, and silly, that's kind of, you know, that's easier. If it's a personal story, you know, if someone's actual story, that's a lot harder. And I work a lot harder to be able to convey that, because it's not just, here's a story. It's like, no, this is someone's life, you know, this is someone's memoir or whatever. So you've got to be really, really careful with that, and quite sensitive, I think, as well. So it's about what I think I can do with the show, and what I can assess quite quickly now is I could easily see this over a 12 to 18 month period. And I guess that's what I look for with artists, to make them sustainable, to make the show sustainable, and to make me sustainable as well. There'll be occasional shows where it might just be a one-off show that I produce, and that's fine. It may be a one-off initially, and then we decide to do more. But really, I'm looking for shows that have a life beyond that one season.
Yeah.
We've got I think we've got a really high churn rate in Australia, particularly, of people doing shows and then going, oh, well, that's done. And you're like, what? But how was the show? Oh, it went really well. How well? Oh, we sold out my shows. Did you get good reviews? Yeah, we got great reviews. So what are you doing with it? Oh, well, that's done. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
I've been touring a cabaret. Yeah, I've been touring a cabaret show for 3 years, and we're not even, there's nowhere, we haven't even scratched the surface yet. We've done a lot of things with it, but, there's other shows that I've toured for 4 or 5 years across nationally and now internationally. Well, not so much now, but we might have to wait. We might have to wait for that. But there's so much more life out of it. And I think then that needs a good producer with a good eye on that. I know why potentially some artists do it. It's just like, I would love to, but I'm exhausted. I'm tapped out. I can't, and I don't have the connections to do that. So, they're the shows that I'm looking for.
Yeah, amazing. I think that is just such a key thing to think about too. Is, for me, that was such a mind shift. Like that idea of taking a show and then making the most of it is only something that kind of hit me a few years ago, where I'm like, no, what, I keep losing money. And it's because I invest this into a show, and then we do one season and then it's done. And then you're moving on to the next creative idea, which I think is the issue. I think the artists are like, no, I've done that idea. I've moved on from that to this next idea. But
we've also, I think it's the artists, but I think it's the industry at large too.
Interesting.
I think we've kind of perpetuated that a little bit. I work a lot in festivals and fringe models as well.
Right, yeah.
So, say an artist is doing Adelaide Fringe, like Perth Fringe, Adelaide Fringe Comedy Festival, right? They would do that in 1 year, but they wouldn't go back to those festivals and do the same show the next year. So by the time they finish that show and rested and whatever else, there's really only 6 months in between. So they're also then writing a whole new show, all new graphics, and you see it. Like, I've seen this model over 20 years, and I'm not saying that it's wrong either. I'm just saying that I think there almost needs to be two streams there. Maybe you do the show over a year, but then what happens to that show that went really well? Are you looking to then tour that as well as do the new show next year? Or will you do a new show every second year and stretch the other one out? I think there needs to be bigger thought, conversations, I guess, with artists and producers to think about what they're doing. Also, as not even a side, as a major thing, to not have that kind of burnout. Like, there's so much that goes into a show.
Yeah, and I think there's a real resistance to thinking about our art as a product that you can sell, and that's been the big change for me is really going, no, I trust the art will be amazing. Like, the people I get involved in my shows, the work that we do, the audience feedback is amazing. Like, people love the work we do. So now that we know we can do that, my decision was, now I'm going to focus on trying to build the business around that. And that idea of, for me, I'm now looking at, okay, let's build up a show. Let's get an audience for that. Let's test it. Let's make it work. And then I'm thinking about, right, so then I can recast that show and put that somewhere else and work on the new show. And so that product then becomes something that I don't need to have those actors, and it's the show, that's the script, it's the story, that's the product.
But you've got a template there.
exactly, you know, and so that's how my brain's working now. And I'm still only very early stages in that process, but that's how I'm thinking about it is
I think
what is
that's
the
good.
maximum I can get out of this work over however long is possible? Because, you know, you do a season in one place and like, even like what you're talking about, going to Perth Fringe or Adelaide Fringe, you know, there are a certain number of people that saw that show, but there is a whole lot more that didn't. And the conversation around how good that show was from the last season is going to be a massive boon to help bring people into a new season of it, I would think anyway.
Yeah, and there's also a lot of, I know shows that have done repeat seasons, you know, in Fringe Festival and done even better. Like,
Amazing.
also don't discount that audiences don't want to come back and see the show again.
Yeah,
like
that's
it's
human
really
behavior.
crazy. Yeah.
How many
and
times
I
have people
think,
watched movies this over and over and over again because they love the movie? Yeah, how many people have gone to see Wicked and there's those big blockbuster musicals time and time again? That is exactly how I think too. Is human behavior is human behavior, and whether that's watching your sporting team repeatedly or watching a movie repeatedly, eating the same food repeatedly, like people like to consume what it is they enjoy. So it makes complete sense.
Yeah, and look, you know, it's not going to work for all shows.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's not going to work for all. I mean, there's, you know, everyone knows that show that they might have produced or might have, you know, created that you're like, you know what?
Not so much.
That just stays there, actually. Like, no one else actually needs to see that. That's fine, you know. But there is shows that do really well where you're like, you're mad not to do this again.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's just that not the know-how of going, well, how do I do that? The other comments I often get is, oh, I don't want to, like, I feel like I'm not doing anything if I do the same thing again. And it's like, really? You know, it's a weird kind of mindset that they feel like I've got to keep reinventing. It's like, yeah, but you could do 4 shows in a row and they could all be pretty mediocre, but you might do one show that's amazing, 2 of that, and then come back with another show that's equally as amazing.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I think that's maybe a better model.
And for me, there's that, you know, not every show starts great. Like I was on the judging panel for the local professional theatre awards up here for a few years. And there are some shows that I saw in their opening season that were bad, like professionally produced, funded shows, bad, that then went away, got redeveloped, got worked on, toured in other places, and literally 12, 18 months later came back a completely different show. And the time to actually spend on developing the concept and refining the thoughts and the script and all of that. I mean, I don't think we pay enough tribute to that concept either. So
no, I don't. And I do wonder, because I do like to, predict things, whether they turn out right or wrong. I do wonder whether we will maybe see that a little bit more into 21, 22 because of the bin fire of a year that we've had in 2020, that maybe people have, by choice, they've had to kind of go, oh, well, I'll keep writing or working, or I'll just work with the director on Zoom, so they've had that kind of way longer writing period or development period that we might maybe hope that would be awesome. And we might see a higher caliber of work, which then they might go, oh, this is actually a better way of working now, because I get a better product. Who knows?
Yeah, interesting. Let's hope. I think that was the thing for me is because I first started, my whole thing was that whole creative process of just churn out the work. And I spent most of my non-arts career in management jobs. And, the way I like to lead is from the people up, and listening to them because they're the ones on the ground doing the work. So when I started to actually pull a consistent team together that I'm trying to work with all the time, the same stage manager and the same designer, it was really important for me to go, I need to make sure that I don't kill these people, because it would be very easy to do that. And and my designer, she is amazing from no, we need more time. I'm like, okay.
Yeah, right.
So she's been the one that's really helped me extend the time on our producing timeline on things, because I need that. I need someone to crack the whip behind me and tell me to stop.
Yeah.
It's like, no,
Yeah.
don't do that yet. So yeah,
That's good. That's good.
The work is better for it, I think. So
yeah.
amazing.
And as I said, it's not going to suit everyone. And there's some kind of, formula that artists have got into where, they might go, yeah, but that kind of suits what I'm doing. And I'd rather churn out stuff every year and you do, I mean, you still learn stuff from doing
totally.
that.
Yeah.
But I think I think it's just that kind of broader look to go, maybe there might be a different way of doing that or a different model. Yeah.
So, I've got a list of things here and I'm like, oh yeah, covered. You mentioned COVID, the world broke. One thing I wanted to ask you, based on your experience, what's been some of the big learnings for you coming out of this period? Like what's made, obviously we've had to rethink what we do. We've had to rethink how we manage, shows and audiences. What have been some of the big takeaways from a positive? I mean, obviously, there was a lot of people out of work and, a lot of people, struggling over the last number of months. But what have been the things that you kind of look back at and go, okay, I need to do that differently, and that's actually going to be better for business generally in the long term anyway? Is there anything that's really come through that for you?
Probably just more a sense of maybe what I'm kind of calling maybe foolproofing or future-proofing your show a bit more. Again, this isn't going to work for all shows, but having some kind of, I think, digital element is going to be the way forward. I think every festival now, major arts festival or even fringe festivals, I think will have some kind of digital arm to it that you can, put your show in on. So I think there's, or there'll be those hybrid models where you can do a live performance or you can do a digital version of it or both,
both. Yeah.
Which I think is kind of interesting. And I think potentially we would have got there as an industry maybe in 10 years. I think what COVID's done is maybe fast track some of that stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, in terms of marketing, video is, way above everything else. So it's interesting that I guess because it's theatre or comedy or anything on stage is so traditional, we don't think about video or the videos that we've seen of shows on stage. It's like, whatever.
There's a camera way back there.
Yeah, even as I do a bit of programming, even as a programmer, I mean, a lot of the stuff that I do see is going to be on screen. And so often people go, I'm sorry, it's not great. It's like, I understand. But I think the positives that will come through it is maybe people rethinking how they work. But also I think we'll see more potential collaborations in lots of different ways with that stuff. So even, whether it's working with videographers or other kind of documentary kind of style, or even just other collaborations with other artists, I think we'll see a bit more of that. I think, as I said, there'll be way more kind of digital content that will come out. And I think we'll get cleverer and more creative of how we will do that. Melbourne Fringe Festival recently ran, most of their festival online. And I was so impressed at the content that I saw and the way artists have used video to make it this whole other, it's like a whole other thing, There's the stage show, and then it's not even like an online series, it's like a whole other thing, but it's brilliant, and it means it's really accessible for various different reasons for people, whether it's remotely or disability or stay-at-home parent or whatever it is. There's an interesting model there, and there's an interesting financial model there too, I think, with digital. If you've shot something really great, it's that one-to-many model where you can kind of put stuff out and you can potentially make,
more money,
some more money for a product that's already sitting there anyway. And I don't think that's going to devalue people like, oh, we can't move everything onto digital. And it's like, well, no, we can't, but we can be creative how we do that. You can still offer a live season and then maybe months later offer the remount as a as a digital version, you know?
Yep. I totally agree. The online, offline space for me has been really important for a long time, partly because for me it was about saving money, you know? I mean,
Yeah,
long
right.
before
Yeah.
COVID hit, we moved our production meetings onto Zoom, and
Yeah.
we're doing those because, you know, you drive half an hour to have an hour meeting and then drive half an hour home. I'm like, this is dumb. Let's just do it online. And everyone's like, yes, let's. And that was, you know,
Yeah.
that was a great move. And one of the things I did when I was first starting kind of professional producing, trying to get things happening out there, I produced 2 shows on Twitter that people actually subscribed to the characters on Twitter, and the tweets were the show and you could interact with them. And so that online, offline thing's been in my brain for years. And
Yes, that's cool.
yeah, and it's really interesting to see how that's really starting to get embraced now that technology particularly is making things so easy. Like, you know, 10 years ago, there's a whole bunch of stuff you couldn't do that you can do now because.
But this is the thing. So, like, some artists like yourself maybe were sort of dabbling in that. Even for me, like I had online courses and I've been using Zoom since 2015. Like, you know, that kind of world is nothing new, but everything was brought into sharp focus into 2020. So from an artistic or creative point of view, we're all kind of going, but the other element to that is that all of your audience has also moved into that realm. We're not trying to convince audience to go, hey, you know what? You can log on to this thing and you can watch it. And they're like, oh, is it like Netflix? I don't understand. Like everyone's kind of joined at the same point. So I think that's really interesting because we're not having to kind of explain what it is. Everyone automatically has just got onto this level. And so now creatives and people, you know, with that kind of brain will go, and we can do this and this and this. So I think it's actually really, I'm actually taking it as a really kind of exciting leap, I think
there's so much opportunity with the online stuff. And, you know, I think that whole like you said, the crystallization of audiences now just accepting it, I think that's opening massive doors for artists. I really think it is. I think there's so much opportunity there. And it'll just, people will just, you know, the amount of creativity that people can apply to creating a show for the stage, when they start applying that thinking to what they can do digitally as well, I think it'll just really start to blow open some doors for people. Be amazing.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, definitely.
You mentioned a couple of things there that I actually really wanted to talk about, because one of the things that I think you do really, really well is diversify your income streams. You know, so I'm suspecting that you can't live life purely on your producing wages.
No, and I'm very open about that, and I say that I don't know any independent producers that earn a living just from independent producing. It's almost near impossible. But it's like artists too. Artists don't earn just from creating show, or very, you know, a tiny percentage would. So again, I worked out very early on that I did need to diversify my income. And so, I've always done other stuff within the business, as well as other gigs that I do myself. So I might program, you know, venues or things like that. And that might be a contract, or I might do smaller contracts with other organizations. They're still all within producing and programming. So it's all within the same kind of area, but and then I brought in two online products, which
the artist boot camp and the producers boot camp, which, you know, great. So how long do they run? Tell us a little bit about those for anybody that might be interested.
Yeah, sure. Cool. So the Artist Boot Camp is a 4-week online course, and it basically is designed for self-producing artists. So people wearing both of those caps, and it takes you just through those real foundational points of producing, budgets, marketing, and pitching your shows. So all the little bits and pieces that I would have found really useful when I started, or artists start, to kind of go, and often it's a case, you sort of mentioned it before, it's a case of, I am doing okay, I'm on the right track, or I understand, or so that one's a 4-week course. It's online. It gets fed out over every week. I've run it since 2015. So I've had over about 150 artists go through it.
Brilliant.
But this year I've actually paused it because I'm redoing all of the content. So that will be ready for release again next year.
Great.
And then the other course, which is probably more of my, I guess, signature course now, is the producer boot camp. So that is absolutely geared for people that produce work for artists or want to get into, the role of an independent producer. I do have some kind of higher level artists that are self-producers, but I usually try and survey people, mainly for their sake, to be honest, to make sure it's a right fit for them. Because I always want to make sure I'm bringing value to whatever I'm kind of putting out there. So that one's a much more extensive course. That's a 6-week online course, but as part of that course, we also do weekly live group mentoring and catch-ups about each of those topics. So that kind of delves way more into the role of the producer, contracting, negotiations, grants, touring, marketing. And that's run over 6 weeks. And I do different rounds of those because that's a live round. The artist boot camp, you can kind of purchase any time now.
Oh, brilliant.
But the producer boot camp is much more of a all-in kind of group.
Set dates, time period.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So what are some really kind of good things, great ways, I don't know what the word is, but that you've seen kind of artists that you've been producing or working with diversify their income streams? So for anyone that might be watching or listening, if an artist has a show, I mean, we talked about going digital. You mentioned some stuff before about being able to use the digital space. What are some of the other kind of things you've seen artists do to diversify their income streams through the work they do?
One of the main ones I've seen, but again, it doesn't fit for all artists, and the more kind of obvious one is doing some kind of workshop. So either in person or maybe now online. So if they're particularly skilled in a particular area, I do produce a lot of artists who do kind of more professional clowning, physical theatre style, so they run workshops in that. Others run workshops in writing or even just how to kind of construct a show from a creative kind of point of view. So workshops, I think, are a really great way of doing that. And artists are always looking for other ways to upskill in that area. And if they're good at what they do, I think that's a really good way to go. In terms of other to sort of diversify for other artists, I guess it also then depends on what their skill set is. Some of them go out to also teach and lecture as well. So it's often still within that realm of this is what I do, but this is what I teach. So that's probably the main thing that I see artists kind of doing. And again, you might not have even, if there's an artist listening, you might not even thought about doing that, but you might go, I could run a workshop on these things. And I think even the more niche things are even better,
There's riches in the niches, as they say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's just about thinking about that kind of stuff and seeing whether that's a fit.
Yeah, I think it's a really great way to go. It's something that I personally have been erring away from. I didn't want to do it, but partly because I felt kind of imposter syndrome to a degree, where I'm like, well, who am I to teach other people this? And so for me, I've started doing stuff for kids because I know I can teach them. I know I've got some stuff to share, but so it's interesting. There's always someone that knows less than you that would be happy to learn from you, and you just got to find those people, I think. So that's brilliant.
Yeah, and I think it's also not devaluing in terms of what your experience is. If you've got value to offer, give it a go.
Yeah, I think we're bred to not talk ourselves up, so it's sort of having that mindset shift to go, no, actually, I'm good at this, and I can teach somebody this. It's there's a little bit of courage involved in it, but there's always someone who can learn. Yeah, amazing. And I wanted to ask, sort of wrap up pretty soon, but what do you think it takes to be a good producer? What makes a good producer for anybody out there that might be thinking about it, looking at it as a potential job? what makes a good producer in your eyes?
Okay. I think that I guess I'm basing this on myself, so I guess that's it's sort of really hard. But
Well, you've got a good
do
track record, so.
oh, thank you. But I do think this is actually, I do think this is relevant, that someone that relishes in being behind the scenes, like,
Yeah.
if you've got any inkling of going, yeah, I'll do this, but I really want to be on the, it's just not going to work, because you can't be the champion for that artist if that's actually inside what you want to do. And if that is, that's totally fine. So I think that's kind of first and foremost. Then I think about being a good producer, I think it's another kind of, thing that kind of comes up, that producers just do the admin. And it's like, sure, there's a lot of admin that I do, but we're not glorified secretaries or administrators. And if artists are looking for help in that way, absolutely fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with getting someone in or bringing someone in to help you with all of that, because there is a lot. There's a lot of moving parts, especially if you're doing a lot of things at the same time. That's fine, but I would not bring a skilled producer in to do that, because I think you're missing a huge opportunity of what that producer can bring. So I think a good producer knows what their role is, knows how, like, what they're good at and what they're not, is able to communicate that with the artist from the get-go, and really lay it straight. I think any artist working with me knows exactly where I stand and what I do and how I operate. I'm super transparent. I feel like I'm pretty transparent in pretty much everything that I do. If you're listening to me, or you meet me, or you email me, like, I'm pretty consistent. It's not like I get off this call and then turn into a different person. So I think there needs to be someone that you can relate to. It's very much like a relationship, so you need to be able to work with that person. Someone said once that you need a producer that you're happy to have a drink with, or a sneaky cigarette at 2 a.m. in a car park with,
Nice.
Like, if that's that person, then you're probably all right. But I also think, in terms of what makes a good producer, communication, 100%. That's the first thing I see break down with a lot of like producer-artist relationships. Transparency, but also I think, forward planning and strategic kind of thinking, looking beyond, as we've sort of talked about, beyond that season. So yes, there can be producing that season, but what's happening 6-12 months ahead of that, and constantly kind of being on that. I think that's what makes a great producer, someone that can think in the immediate, but also in the long term.
That bigger picture stuff.
Yeah.
So what's the process for you to actually take on a new artist? So what do you is it like a certain number, like, how do you go about that? Is it, because I know a lot of people would just go, I need a producer, and try and rush in.
They do.
So how do you build that connection over time, or what's the process for you?
It's really varied. Yeah, it really is varied. I mean, to be completely honest, I'll get, in kind of peak time, I can get 3 to 4 emails a week of saying, can you produce me? And which is interesting. But for me, that process has to go quite slowly. And that would be my advice for any artist actually looking for a producer. Don't be so gun-ho and going, this is all my problem solved. In fact, if you get a producer, or you get a good producer, you should actually be working more than ever and harder than ever, because they're pushing you to, to do stuff. It's not a kind of all hands off, I'm good now. It should actually be more work. So I think for me, or for any artist, but definitely for me, I go slow with that process, because once that's locked in, that horse is bolted. It kind of moves quite fast. And if it's not a right match, that's a really icky situation to be in, for both parties. Like, for me as the producer or the the artist with the producer going, it's not, this isn't working. So I think you need to be really, what I like, you need to be really slow with that. So what I like is artists should be asking me as many questions as what I'm asking them. And if they're not, to me, that's a bit of a red flag. Sometimes I can coax it out of them, and often they just don't know that. But, they're often, I'm asking them, so what are you doing? What are your plans? Like, what are you hoping to do with this show? Or what have you done? Blah, blah. But often there's not a lot of questions back.
Yeah.
Now, if I was the artist, I'd be going, well, what can you do for me? What do you see in me? How do you see this working? What contacts do you have? Can you give me some case studies? Can you give me some examples? I want to see that back and forth, because I think it's like an interview both ways.
Yeah. So you really, it's about getting on the same page about what the future looks like for this show and this relationship, isn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I'm also, it took me ages to kind of get to this point. Not to say that I produce stuff just because I said yes. Maybe in the early days, I think independent producers, when they're first starting, same with artists, they're like, I will produce this show, and I think that's all fine. But as you kind of get older and you get wiser, I'm more than happy. And I say this on all of my collateral, my website, and I mean it. And people know that I mean it. I'm like, my email, my phone number is on my website. Like, seriously, drop me an email, give me a call. I will email back. Like, that's no BS, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you, or several conversations if I think it's going okay. But I will absolutely call it to say, I don't think I'm the right producer for you, or I don't think this is the right mix because of these reasons, and just kind of call it quite black and white, because if I don't think I can do justice to the artist, then we've got nowhere to go. So
it just saves a lot of hassle down the track, doesn't it?
It does.
The power to say no and know why. I think it's something we can all get better at. It just saves so much heartache later if it goes pear-shaped.
Yeah. So my advice to artists would just be, ask the producer heaps of questions as well.
Yeah,
and also,
brilliant.
if the producer's not asking you questions, then that should be a red flag.
That's a red flag for you. Yeah.
Like for the artist as well. So, yeah.
Yeah. Love it. Thank you so much for the
That's
chat.
all right.
It's been amazing. So if anyone out there wants to connect with you, what are the best places to do that?
Just head straight to my website, which is milke.com.au. So it's MILKE. And all of my information and courses and podcasts and all the stuff is on there. And I also do a weekly newsletter too that you can sign up to as well. So
that's always filled with great, valuable information too. So I'm been on your mailing list for a while.
Nice.
So, that's great. So awesome. Well, I'll make sure I put links for all of that down in the description on the YouTube version of this. And Laura, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
My absolute pleasure. Awesome.
Talk to you soon.